The Grizzlies' preseason home slate couldn't have got off to a much better start. Shots were falling, alley-oops were flying, steals, deflections, all the things that make the Grizzlies were happening on Monday night. But a fifth starter stepped up and potentially solidified that last spot. We're going to talk about that and more coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, covering your Memphis Grizzlies. The home opener is done now. The Grizzlies took care of their preseason home opener against the Orlando Magic, took care of business rather in dominant fashion. Memphis got off to a 12-2 start. Didn't look back from there. 109-97 victory against the Orlando Magic. But thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies and making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen each and every day. Make sure you continue to subscribe, leave comments. We tune in to all the comments that you provide as well, and it helps make our show better. And make sure you tune in to Locked On Grizzlies wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you want to watch or listen. Locked On Grizzlies is there. So we thank you for tuning in as well. But Grizzlies are now 2-0 in preseason. First preseason game, Saturday against the Milwaukee Bucks. So we saw certain players play. We saw some players sit out. Particularly, a lot of the projected starters did not play. John Morant, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams, and then there were some other players. Tyus Jones didn't play, Xavier Tillman, and so forth. The first game, we saw a lot of the rookies get a lot of playing time. Second game, John Morant returned. Desmond Bane was back. Dillon Brooks was in the lineup as well. Steven Adams. Those were 4 of the 5 starters. The fifth starter was someone who started in both games. He started the first game, then he started the second game. Played pretty good in both, too. And that fifth starter was Santi Aldama. Let's talk a little bit about Santi Claus. Because before I get into the performance of Santi Aldama against the Orlando Magic, I just want to say it's hard for me not to say I told you so, but it's still relatively early, so I'll hold it. I'll hold those comments until the regular season gets here and we see more performances like these past 2 out of Santi Aldama. But it was a very encouraging performance with the starting lineup from Santi Aldama against the Orlando Magic, and I think a lot of fans, quite frankly, were impressed what he brought to the table in this game. Santi Aldama, 7 of 9 shooting, 4 of 5 from three-point range, 21 points and 6 rebounds in this game against the Orlando Magic. Came out, made his first 4 three-pointers, and he looked good. Even the three-pointer that he missed later on in the game, it was online and looked good. But one of the three-pointers, I believe it was his 4th and final make from 3, was a bank shot where he thought he was fouled and he was falling to the ground and he's looking up at the referee. But Santi Aldama, I think, is kind of slowly ending the conversation of who's going to step up and be the starter in place of Jaren Jackson Jr. We went through all the other guys. Jake LaRavia had a really good 4th quarter in the first game, first preseason game. Second game, I thought he was super aggressive in this game. Noteworthy. That was very noteworthy. But this is about Santi Claus giving out presents, giving out the gifts to the Orlando Magic, taking them off the dribble. I thought he was very, very confident in the way he played. That's the word. that's been used a lot when describing Santi Aldama. Confidence, right? Well, he didn't hesitate shooting the ball. He mixed it up as well. He did some pump fakes off the dribble. It got teammates involved, made a couple nice passes, alluding to the playmaking that Taylor Jenkins has alluded to when he's talked about Santi Aldama. But Aldama's performance, I think, was probably the most or one of the most encouraging things to take away from this preseason victory against the Orlando Magic, especially being, the fifth starter spot without Jaren has been discussed as much as anything. And here's the thing about Santi Aldama, right? First round pick 2 seasons ago, last pick, 30th pick in the first round. But personality wise, Aldama is just a very even keeled dude. I remember when I was out in Las Vegas and Aldama had one of his tougher games, and I was talking to him after that game, and he basically said, "Look, at the end of the day, I get to go to sleep, I flush it, and tomorrow's going to be a new day." That was his mindset after a couple early struggles in summer league. So then he has breakout games in summer leagues, and now he has 2 well put together preseason games. And I asked him after the game, and he basically, I asked him, how do you sleep now? I mean, you just had this big performance. You put up 21 points, which was second on the Grizzlies behind John Morant, who will get more into his performance later. But you had this big performance. I mean, you make 4 3-pointers. He didn't make more than 2 in any regular season game for the Grizzlies last season. How do you sleep now? I'm thinking, he's going to say something like he's going to sleep, drastically different than he would. But the answer pretty much was on par with the same thing that he said to me in Summer League. He said that, look, obviously he'll sleep a little bit better, but at the end of the day, he's going to go to sleep, he's going to flush it, and it's going to be about tomorrow. It's going to be about preparing, getting the individual work in, and then it's going to be about, getting ready for the Miami Heat, who the Grizzlies will play on Friday in their next preseason game. So all things considered, I think, the mindset that Santi Aldama is displaying is, there's a lot of, cliche talk when it comes to players say, oh, I'm just preparing for the next game and things like that. But this guy has been pretty, he's been pretty firm in having that mindset. Like I said, this was him in Las Vegas after a bad game in Summer League, and this was him after he just had one of the better performances of his young NBA career. So all in all, that I think that's just who Santi Aldama is, a very even-keeled, mild-mannered guy who's not going to get too high when he has breakout games. He's not going to get too low when he, has bad games. And he even said as well, after the game that, hey, look, you're going to make shots, you're going to miss shots. As long as he understands that, he'll be fine. And he said that today, this was one of those good days. He made shots in this game. So big performance from Santi Aldama. I think that's an encouraging performance, not just for him and his confidence, but it eases the concern a bit from the Grizzlies side on who can be that player that steps up to start in that power forward role. Because as we've said time and time again, there's a domino effect. There's a ripple effect that goes into play with this. The backup power forward position. We saw Jake LaRavia did more in this game, but I'm sure other guys will get better chances. David Roddy probably will get more of a chance. Xavier Tillman will probably get more of a chance. Xavier Tillman, by the way, did not play in this game, and Kenneth Lofton Jr. as well. 2 players that did not play in this game that were healthy. So we know Killian Tilly, Danny Green, and Jaren Jackson Jr. did not play because they're not fully healthy yet. But Xavier Tillman and Kenneth Lofton Jr. were 2 noticeable DNPs in this game. And I asked Taylor Jenkins after the game, I asked him why didn't Xavier Tillman and Kenneth Lofton Jr. play in this game? And he basically said, he wanted to give the guys who did play ample opportunity. So it's from the sound of it, Taylor Jenkins didn't want guys, just out there playing 10, 15 minutes and playing, 15 guys. He wanted to get 10 10 guys, which, 10 guys played the bulk of the minutes. David Roddy checked in, at the, I believe it was, David Roddy checked in the fourth quarter. But through the first 3 quarters, there was a firm 10-man rotation that Taylor Jenkins wanted to get a lot of, opportunity in this game. So that's why Kenneth Lofton Jr. and Xavier Tillman did not play. A lot of depth. He said that those two will continue to get more opportunities throughout the course of the preseason. But I think based on what we've seen through 2 preseason games, Santi Aldama led the team in minutes after the first game. He came back in this game, added up another 24 minutes. The Grizzlies are giving him a lot of opportunity. He's on the floor a lot right now. I think this further solidifies that Santi Aldama should be the opening day starting power forward, and he's really positioned himself well to be in that position. Santi Aldama finished second in points in his past game. He was second in the teams with 21 points. The leader was Ja Morant. Well, let's talk about Ja Morant's performance and an interesting tidbit that he said, after the game as well. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about another interesting tidbit, and that's Built Bar. Built Bar is one of the best options out there if you are a lover of chocolate. I don't think there's a better option out there. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're tasty, and not only are they covered in 100% real chocolate, but they also emphasize, the healthy factor as well. But we talked about Built Bar. We talked about the Built Bar Puffs. If you haven't tried the Built Bar Puff yet, you're missing out, by the way, on one of life's greatest joys. But there's a new favorite coming on as well, and that's the Cookie Dough Chunk Puffs. Check out the Cookie Dough Chunk Puffs as well at Built Bar, because they have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and like all Built Bars, covered in 100% real chocolate. You get all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of really making it. And again, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have 15 grams of protein in them. So if you want to go get yours, you run over to built.com right now and go snag yourself a box for you and your family. Go over to built.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your next order. Again, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your next order. So with the Grizzlies, Santi Aldama, he shined. That was a little bit unexpected. Ja Morant, he shined, but that was expected. Ja Morant, I mean, I don't know what else to say about the guy. 22 points, 7 of 11 from the field, 7 of 10 from the free throw line. Made it look easy. He made it look easy. But there were a lot of takeaways, I think, from watching Ja Morant's performance against the Orlando Magic. More than one thing that really stood out is the way he got to the rim, the quickness. There was a subtleness to him. Ja Morant isn't just a straight line speed guy. This isn't a guy who's just, I'm faster than you and he's going to beat you to the spot. That's not what makes Ja Morant an all-star talent. Ja Morant has the ability to stop, to start. He can move left to right. He's very agile. And all of that combines, it just makes it hard for one defender to stay in front of him. The Orlando Magic came out with an interesting starting lineup in this game. Paolo Banchero played the 3. Then you had Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter in the starting lineup. So they had 3 guys 6'10" or taller in the starting lineup. And when I saw that, I said, man, it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts Ja Morant finishing at the rim. And it had no impact at all. In fact, I recall one play in particular, sitting up there close to my courtside seat. Ja Morant had Paolo ISO one-on-one, and he went straight at him, a couple side-to-side dribbles, and again, using that agility, that start to stop. And he just speeds past Paolo, finishes with the left hand. I believe he got the foul on that play. And you can hear John Morant yelling from the floor, "Yeah, Rook," after he just went at him, letting him know, "Yeah, I'm going at you." I think, the intensity was there. John Morant said when he's on the floor, preseason, playoffs, regular season, doesn't matter. He's going to give 100%. I think the intensity was there from him as well. And that intensity carried over to the defensive side, which it'll be interesting to see over the course of the season what type of defense, John Morant plays on a consistent level. Uh, Defense has been one of those things where Morant has been more heavily critiqued about at this point in his career. You look at his defensive box plus minus in his first 3 seasons, each year finished in the negatives. But overall, I mean, this past game against the Magic, he was getting after it. When you talk about just manning up against your guy, I recall a play where he's one-on-one against Jalen Suggs, and Morant sliding his feet. Jalen Suggs dribbles to the left, can't get past him. Jalen Suggs dribbles to the right, can't get past him. And Morant's talking to him throughout the entire process. He goes, "Nope, nope," as Suggs tries to get past him. Then I look at other times. He's navigating through ball screens. Again, you're playing against a Orlando Magic backcourt where they have a lot of ball screens for guys like Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs. Just watching how John Morant has a better understanding of angles and getting through some of those screens. And then just quite frankly, the defensive awareness that stood out to me as well. Just watching how Ja just can read the game better. He talks a lot about, film study, and he talked about it, in his post-game presser, watching his teammates and knowing where to get them the ball on the offensive end. But you can see it translating on defense too. John Morant had 3 steals in this game, and 2 of them, I remember off the top of my head, 2 of them led to easy runouts and transition points. The Grizzlies as a team had 13 steals that turned into 30 transition points, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But John Morant, defensively, I think that was very noteworthy the way he got after it on that end. And you combine that with the offensive, punch that he's bringing. And I mean, this guy looks almost in regular season form, and not quite yet, not quite in regular season form. He caught a cramp there in the third quarter, did not come back in the game, but it was just a cramp, nothing to be worried about there. He was on the sideline celebrating with his teammates with no problem. So Morant looked good. He looks healthy, and I think there's just a couple other things he said after the game that are just noteworthy to keep you in tune with, to monitor, throughout the season. He talked about working on his landing, and he mentioned defense as one of his biggest, emphasis things that he wanted to work on this offseason. But I thought it was interesting that he said that he worked on leg strength and landing. So, I mean, most Grizzlies fans, you've seen John Morant fall a lot of different ways over the first 3 seasons of his career. And landing, it's one of those things where people said, look, John Morant's going to have to figure out, better ways to land off his feet in order to, avoid, injuries going forward. And I think that's something that he and his team and the Grizzlies have taken note of, and he's starting to emphasize it. So watching him in this game, you're seeing, him attack the rim. I saw him go to his left hand layups a lot more often, whereas some of those opportunities felt like times where maybe he would have tried to, go up for the dunk, and maybe that impacted his landing and things like that. So I think you're seeing, Ja just be more self-aware of how to be more durable throughout the course of a season. That's what all of that just leads back to at the end of the day. But better John Morant, I mean, we've seen him steadily improve through his first 3 seasons, and now he's in year 4, and he toyed with the Magic. I cannot wait to see, how he fares against this Miami Heat. offense if he's playing, in that game on Friday. Ja Morant, if he plays anywhere close to the level he played against this Orlando Magic team, against a Miami Heat defense that's, quite frankly, more stout, has better individual defenders, and has Bam Adebayo, one of the top and more versatile defensive players in the game on the back end, then we're really talking about Morant taking another leap, which would involve MVP consideration. So we talked about Santi Aldama and Ja Morant and what those guys will bring to the table. Well, what about the Grizzlies team? This Orlando Magic game, there were a lot of big takeaways on this team, this year's version of this team. I'm going to talk about why I saw some similarities to last year's squad coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. Now, before we talk about, the similarities from last year's squad, I want to talk to you about, just how the Grizzlies have stood out and made themselves one of the better teams, at causing havoc. Last season, steals, top of the NBA, blocks, top of the NBA, stocks, which combination of steals is blocks, top of the NBA. These led to the Grizzlies being at the top of the NBA in fast break points. So you factor in all of these, we call them the hustle stats, so to speak, the hustle stats. The Grizzlies were at the top of the NBA in all of these categories. And once again, the Grizzlies shined in those areas. Before we talk about those exact areas, first I want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen every day. Make sure you check out the Ultimate Pro Basketball Preview. Starts on October 10th. It's a 6-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NBA season. The local team experts, that includes me, that includes my co-host Joe Molinax, and the NBA insiders of the Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey. They're all going to come together, combining into one ultimate NBA preview. So again, that's starting October the 10th. All you have to do is first search for Ultimate Pro Basketball Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And that's where you're going to find us. So the Grizzlies had 13 steals that turned into 30 fast break points in this game against the Orlando Magic. And it wasn't just that. That doesn't even tell the entire story. What about on the glass here? As I'm looking at the stat sheet right now, Grizzlies dominated the glass. 50 total rebounds. The Magic had 37 total rebounds. The Grizzlies had 9 offensive rebounds. And all of this was evident, because one, Steven Adams was back in the lineup. Steven Adams is arguably one of the best offensive rebounders, one of the better defensive rebounders in the NBA in this game. And there were times in this game where you saw not just Steven Adams, but I think there are other players, Ja Morant. I talk about his rebounding a lot in the past, just him for a guard. He has been a really good rebounder so far in his career. Desmond Bane had 5 rebounds in this game. John Conchar coming off the bench. I really think John Conchar is going to be a huge rebounder for the Grizzlies this season. John Conchar finished this game with 9 boards, led the team easily. 22 minutes, had 9 boards, 3 offensive rebounds, tied Steven Adams with the team lead in offensive rebounds. And he just has a nose for the ball. There's no other way to put it. John Conchar doesn't have a 42-inch vertical, although he can jump. Evident there was one block he had closing out on the three-pointer that was pretty impressive in that game. But John Conchar's rebounding for a wing is elite. Losing DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson is that's what this conversation kind of evolves around here. A lot of people said when the Grizzlies lost Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton, you lost 2 of your better players at, those havoc plays, creating steals, deflections, stocks. Melton and Kyle Anderson are two of the better players on the team. Anthony Melton played with the 76ers yesterday as well, and I believe he started in that game. And guess how many steals he had? He had 3 steals. So he's still doing what Anthony Melton did with the Grizzlies as well. But you wondered how, like who would step up. And I'm starting to think, one, there's a really good system in place here defensively from Taylor Jenkins and his staff that just allow for defenders just to get their hands on the ball and just create trouble for opponents. Because you look at this game, I mentioned that the Grizzlies had 13 steals. I mentioned that Morant had 3 steals, but it wasn't just those 2 guys. Steven Adams, 3 steals. Desmond Bane, 2 steals. Zaire Williams comes off the bench, another guy with multiple steals. Then you had Brandon Clark, Jake LaRavia as well getting a steal. So overall, you only had 6 guys get steals. So that's a little bit, probably a little less than typical of the Grizzlies. But you had guys with 3, 2, 3 steals in this game. So havoc-wise, the team didn't look different. The Grizzlies did not look different from that perspective. So what's the other side of this when you talk about losing DeAnthony Melton and you talk about losing a guy like Kyle Anderson? So Jake LaRavia, I mentioned earlier, the guy came in and he's your starting force. So that's probably your quote unquote Kyle Anderson, replacement right now. Jake LaRavia came in firing. 4 3-point attempts in the first quarter. Let me tell you why this is noteworthy if you haven't picked up on it yet. We talked about Jake LaRavia in Las Vegas, right? Came out that first game in Salt Lake City in Summer League and shot the ball well, shot with confidence, took a lot of shots. And then over the course of Summer League, there were games where he didn't take more than 1 shot until late in the fourth quarter. And there was just a multitude of games where he didn't take, more than 6, 7 shots. And fans were asking, they're saying, is he aggressive? Why isn't he being as aggressive? As I said, I spoke with his college head coach, Steve Forbes from Wake Forest. And Steve Forbes said, look, he's actually one of the better players that I've had to tell to shoot the ball more in the past, just because he's a naturally unselfish guy. That's who Jake LaRavia is, unselfish basketball player. But with the Grizzlies they kind of have this thing where if you're open and you're known to shoot the basketball, you better shoot it, or you're probably going to come out of the game. The Grizzlies have this let it fly, mentality, and Taylor Jenkins gives a lot of these guys the green light. And I talked to Jake LaRavia about this recently, and he said it's a big deal to him, and he's aware. There's that self-awareness that he needs to shoot the basketball more. He needs to be more aggressive. And this was the first game. In the last preseason game, wasn't surprised that he took more shots. John Morant wasn't playing. Desmond Bane wasn't playing. Dylan Brooks wasn't playing. Tyus Jones wasn't playing. But the fact that he came in, he was on the court, lined up with Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, and Brandon Clark. And he was getting shots up. You're talking about when he got the ball at the 3-point line, he was firing away. And we're not talking about makes and misses right now, because at the end of the day, he shot 2 of 7 overall, 1 of 6 from 3-point range. Didn't stand out much there. But the fact that he's shooting those shots with confidence is a big deal for the Memphis Grizzlies going forward. I think, Jake LaRavia, it's all about confidence, with young players. And it's all about just, playing your role. That's the role that they envision for him. He's going to be a guy that's going to be able to get open and get some shots. So that's a big development on the second unit. Tyus Jones is still running the second unit. He has a lot. I talked to him yesterday as well. Has a lot of high hopes for this second unit. And one thing that unit will do really well is they're going to run the floor. We saw Zaire Williams, who I've said time and time again, I think is one of the better wings in the NBA when it comes to running the floor. He had a two-play sequence in this past game where, I mean, Ja threaded a pass in between a couple defenders to him, and he got fouled, but he beat those guys up the floor, didn't beat them up the floor again on the very next possession. Got an easy two-point basket. Zaire Williams is already one of the better players at running the floor, but a lot of questions about the bench. Oh, they don't have shot creators. Who's going to create shots in those grouping? Valid. I think those concerns are valid, and we will discuss them more as we watch this bench play. But from what we saw in this game, those guys were moving the ball. The ball was moving with the bench players, and I thought from what we saw in this game, Zaire Williams had 4 assists. We hadn't seen Zaire Williams have too many 4-assist games in the past. Again, got his hands, being more on the ball, being more active with that. Tyus Jones didn't have his best game, 1 of 8, and he only had 2 assists in over 21 minutes. But then again, Tyus Jones is not someone that we have to worry about. You know what Tyus Jones is going to bring to the table over the course of a season. He's led the NBA in assist to turnover ratio the last 4 years. So that's that on that end. I think the bench, if you talk about, okay, this wasn't a perfect game. There had to be something, where that stood out and say, okay, this is an area where we need to see more improvement over the course of the preseason. I think the bench, opportunities in the shots they'll create, that is something to monitor. But overall, it was a decent showing, I think, from this Grizzlies team. They shot 43.9% from the field, only 10 of 36 from three-point range. But again, like some of the shots that they got, and we'll see, how this team develops, shooting-wise over the course of the season. And defensively, they got after it. Held the Magic 39.8% shooting from the field, 33.3% shooting from the three-point line. Turned the Magic over 23 times. We talked about the 13 steals, but the Grizzlies forced 23 turnovers. So again, causing havoc. This team really, and this one game, we're going to see over the course of preseason and then early in the regular season as well. But this team looks really similar to last year's team, and I think that's more of a good thing because they're older than last year's team as well. So that could bode well for the Grizzlies going forward. I think it was an encouraging performance. I think there's a lot to be a lot of takeaways, good takeaways that came from that game. But thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen again today and each and every other day. Going forward, me and Joe will be back together on tomorrow's episode. We're going to talk more about the Grizzlies and just some upcoming storylines going into their next preseason game against the Miami Heat. Now, go over and make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Basketball. That's where Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 daily fantasy basketball show on the planet. And it's free and it's available wherever you get your podcast. So go check out the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. But appreciate you again for tuning on to Locked On Grizzlies here with me, your host today, Damichael Cole. Overall, the Grizzlies looked good in a 109-97 win against the Orlando Magic. There was some sloppiness. There is some conditioning that needs to take place. We mentioned the Ja Morant cramp. Taylor Jenkins mentioned, players playing, in spurts right now and things like that. But the conditioning will get better just because that comes with time. And, the rotation, I mean, they felt in sync. It looked like they were in sync in this game, but it's going to get even sharper going forward. I think that Miami Heat contest is a very, very, very good test coming up. But we'll get to that more later on in the week. But appreciate you again for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole. And once again, thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. And we're going to see you next time.